Thank you, Chandran, and I am very, very pleased to be here, and I commend you for choosing this topic for a number of reasons which will become much more obvious. It's a highly topical issue. The Senate Select Committee has been deliberating. There are about 30 to 40 submissions already in writing, and important people like Geoff Watson here have been making other submissions to it. It's been going on for quite a while. And they have to either recommend against it or keep the momentum going. And there is momentum. There is momentum. I mean, I think 70 to 80% of the population says, yes, we ought to have one, and I'll go through why they're saying that. Why am I here? Transparency International. There's a couple of people in the audience who are members of this body. It's a non-profit civil society group, and I belong to it ever since I retired from the law. And I think I really start off because if you think that corruption is a scourge, as I do, then you ought to lend your weight to tackling it, not just reading about it, but getting a bit more active, as I'm very glad to see people here, some people here I know are doing. And we've got to stay vigilant because it won't stop. We'll slip down the scale in a way that almost all of the countries to our north are slipping, unless we do something to keep it on an even keel. Let's finish all that. Before Transparency International, the reason, where's the lights? Transparency International is about 100 chapters around the world. It's based, the Secretariat's in Berlin, and we're sending a couple of directors over for the annual meeting in a couple of weeks' time because we are hoping to get our position on that international board. Professor A.J. Brown from Griffith is our candidate. And so we want to be much more active. The problem in this part of the world, apart from all the corruption to the north, is New Zealand. And on this map, New Zealand always comes well ahead of us. So any New Zealanders in the room, take a bow. And it's a phenomenon. And you've got to ask yourself, why is it that they can be less corrupt than us for a long time and consistently? So you can look up Transparency International on the website and you'll find this map.
Michael, why don't I pass this around and people can have a look at it?
Yeah, we've got a couple of copies. Yeah. It's, in this light you may need good eyes. But we give, it's a perception index of corruption. It's not a measurement as such, but it's been going on for many years now, and while I've had abuse from senior Chinese people, why are we ranked so low? But otherwise, we don't give the rankings. We just do the statistical correlation of all the answers coming in from about 13 other important bodies like the World Bank. So, Transparency International dedicated to this issue, and we have put in a big submission to that Senate committee to help tackle this issue of the federal ICAC. We have also produced a national integrity study. We have pressured the government to produce a national plan, the Open Government Partnership Plan, and we make submissions all the time to Canberra to keep it rolling on issues like foreign bribery and such like. So, on this particular topic, just a few opening basic remarks about the issue. First of all, we are only concerned with the federal public service and parliamentarians, not with the private sector. We want to follow up to the whistleblower protection law, which is now in there to aid whistleblowers in the federal public service. It is concerned with a lot of statutory corporations like the NBN. They are also part of what we're talking about. we're only concerned with the private sector, the corporations, if they try to manipulate those public servants. And that's, Geoffrey may comment about that. Now, it's not just Canberra we're talking about, clearly. It's not just Canberra, because these people are all over the country. Large numbers of federal public servants are throughout Sydney. They're on the payroll. They're in Tamworth. They set up, and Armidale, places like that. They've got operations. And I was very interested the other day to see that the federal police have got a special new grant of millions of dollars for an office in Perth, so they can watch over all the wrongdoing that happens over there. The federal police, they don't have the fancy uniform like Border Control does. They're the really fancy one that we can talk about that after the break. Why a fancy uniform is not a good thing in the federal public service. The third thing is that they already have a mini ICAC in Canberra for the federal public service. You'll never have heard of it. It's called the Australian Committee for Law Enforcement Integrity, ACLEI, A-C-L-E-I. It's got about 30 people. It's based on a nice little office in downtown Canberra, and it does some good work, except that it only covers federal police, border control, and a couple of miscellaneous agencies. It's not broad-based. It doesn't really pretend to cover the whole of the public service. But it does produce a very lovely annual report, and with future trends, and anyone's interested can get hold of that. That's I found it very useful, but it is not a substitute for an ICAC. Finally, on the opening, the Public Service Commission in Canberra is an estimable body of high public servants who are supposed to keep an eye on these huge number of federal public servants, but they administer a thing called the APS Values, Employment Principles and Code of Conduct. Now, the trouble is with them is that they have very few, if any, teeth, and they only cover half of this huge Commonwealth public servants. And one of the things they can do is they can reprimand, and they can even sack people. The trouble is that if you're really corrupt, you'll make sure that you resign before they do any of that, and then they can't touch you. It's only to do they don't evoke any sort of any real penalties on public servants. But I'd just like to then read to you a couple of comments from this body about the worth of a federal ICAC. They make a number of comments because they take the view that this is not worth worrying about. They shouldn't bother having federal ICAC. And they make a very big submission to that Senate group. The statements in this submission, I was fascinated to read that the current arrangements we have in Canberra are working well. It's proved an effective framework. It's not clear that a federal ICAC would make any difference, and so on. And, by the way, they worry about the high cost of having one. So this is a body with multi-million-dollar budgets and so on, saying, no, we can't have someone doing a general job on corruption in the public service. Now, what do we mean by corruption? It's not fraud. Fraud is just a bit of a subset of corruption. It's a wider concept. And it's not just criminal stuff. Corruption is a wider concept. As you see, the ICAC, they're dealing with it. They don't just deal with crime. If it was a crime, they could refer it off to the police. But they deal with a much wider range of things. Things like conflicts of interest within the public service. Important things, very important things. And that can cause an awful lot of strife. And, well, let me just take an example. I know it's just an allegation now, but there's a man at the top of the ATO who's got himself into a bit of strife with his son. It's only an allegation, right? But the police, the media admitted that because they got hold of an affidavit. But when he found out that his son was in trouble, or there were things going on, why wasn't he, I just asked, why wasn't it his immediate reaction to go and tell his boss? I mean, you've got to ask yourself, how can a guy at that level realise this is pretty serious stuff? He's talking about all sorts of nasty things they could do to his son related to tax, and he doesn't think that this is something you should tell his boss about. I mean, okay, it may not be a crime. We don't know that yet. But just think about integrity and ethics of a man who's earning hundreds of thousands of dollars in his job at the head of that huge department, to which we, those of us in a job, pay a lot of money. So corruption is a big concept and something that, what are the two elements? One is it's secrecy and greed. They are the two things that you've got to bear in mind every time anyone talks about corruption. Don't worry about the technicalities too much, because that can be confusing, but that's what it's all about. People don't talk openly about corrupt conduct. It's all to do under the table. Even in these countries to the north of us, some of which we pay large amounts of money to, like PNG, they don't talk openly about it. It's all done under the blanket or counter or whatever you call it. Every time. It's all spelled out only in code words. What's the problem? Why, in this room, I'm sure, there wouldn't be many people who would have doubts about the need for a federal ICAC. But we can't ignore the fact that there's going to be a lot of opposition, a lot of resistance to this. Not just because, hey, we are Canberra, you are Sydney, the city is sin, it doesn't happen in Canberra, that sort of general argument they can wave around. But they have other arguments too. And I think, well, this evening, maybe after the break, we can talk about some of the more specific arguments because apart from what the Public Service Commission is talking about, the defence of the existing system in the feds, there are a few design issues which we in Transparency International have been focusing on in our submissions. There are some design elements, and some of it Mr. Watson will come out with, which is, I'm sure he'll elaborate upon, which is the way the definition should be framed. Luckily, we have already at the federal level a pretty clear and neat definition. Abuse of public office, perverting the course of justice, or corruption of any kind. So the issues that the state of New South Wales ICAC had that's our belief, which has been already dealt with by that mini ICAC in Canberra. Second issue, exactly what is it going to concentrate on? What is it going to be its priorities? Is it going to be to get people brought before the courts, or is it going to be involved mainly in prevention, monitoring of other agencies and supervision, or, you know, exactly what is its job? Is it forensic, what they call forensics, behind a dealing in a wider view, a wider position than the police can, or is it going to do more to arouse public opinion in the way that the media has in relation to Eddie, people worry about this, especially in parliamentarians. Is their name going to be in the paper before they're found guilty? Then the other big issue is, should the ICAC be involved in electoral fraud and those related issues about donations. That's got to be dealt with, because that caused a lot of heartache here. Remember when the guys in Newcastle were taking the donations and not declaring them? And they were held, I believe, to be guilty of corrupt conduct. Well, now that's been abolished in this state, and we're glad to see that that's happened, because now the ICAC, as I understand it, can only deal with the facts of those matters when referred by the Electoral Commission, so they don't have to get involved in that except on request. Thanks, Steve. And really, that's resourcing is the final thing I'd like to deal with, because once a green light is given at all, in principle, to this move, there's no point to it at all unless they provide adequate funding, proper staffing, and a guarantee that they won't cut back just because there's some criticism of the politicians and ministers. I mean, that's the real problem. You've got to, if it's the word independent, Committee Against Corruption, the word independent is a really tough one. And we've managed to achieve independence here despite enormous attacks on the ICAC here. We've managed to achieve that, but again, Canberra and the federal people may have be less robust about that protection. But and the main thing is the money. If you don't keep the money up and guaranteed to maintain it at a certain level, then there's not much point in having a federal ICAC. So I fervently believe that it is an urgent need to have this body, and the reason is that corruption can happen at any time. It can spring up at any level, and unless we are vigilant about it, if we're going to become complacent about it at all, it will just spring up just so much more often. Thank you.